Welcome to Scramble Game Show. You know, today it's the first week of this year, 2013. We start a production, and I really don't want to start with this topic. But on the other hand, you know, since December we have heard so much news about the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting, and such a tragedy. And the school is basically in, close to our neighborhood. And everybody is really shocked. And I can't imagine how the people in that school or in that town, is coping with. And this is really a terrible thing. So I decided for this week we make a special show to talk about securities in schools. Okay, schools are environments for our children to learn. They ought to be secure and peaceful, and enjoyable for the kids to learn while they're in school. But yet we have these kind of tragedy that really causing concern. Why is the question? Why do we have these kind of tragic incidences? And of course, our thoughts are immediately would be, how do we prevent things like this to happen again? Now, many people, of course, realize sometimes these things are hard to predict because the people involved are sometimes unstable people, and there is a very difficult sort of a tracking of people. How would people behave or become all of a sudden sort of snapped? It's difficult to predict. So for the last few weeks, we have heard from television, radio, newspapers, everywhere talking about these issues. How do you, prevent these situations? And if you do have situation like this, how do you handle the emergencies, procedures, or do we have procedures that put in place in schools to minimize the disaster or the damage? Okay, and whether the school administrators and teachers are trained, or at least be aware of how to react to a situation like this. So today, I have prepared a few pictures, and would like to talk about this issue. How do we improve securities in schools? Okay, let me first turn on a picture which has triggered the whole thinking. Is this Sandy Hook Elementary School? Children, 14 or so, or 6 teachers killed in one incident. It's such a tragedy. Now, this particular school, in fact, is within probably 20 to 25 miles from us in the sense of the studio in Westchester. It's so close to us, and that's why it's a concern. Now, in the news, we heard many people talking about, well, this is all because weapons. In fact, people shows the, we shouldn't have this kind of weapons available to people because the weapons, so that people get killed. And of course, if you read other articles and the news reports, particularly people sort of pro-gun, like the National Rifle Association. Everybody knows that they are the organization sort of members are gun owning or carrying people. They, of course, have their legitimate reasons for owning guns. For example, for sports like hunting and entertainment, competitive shooting, and things like this sort. That does have a legitimate reason to own guns. And of course, our Constitution provides people the right to have weapons. Now, this kind of a debate actually happened many, many times. Every time when you have incidents like this that people brought again, and again, the debate somehow never really result into a conclusion. For simple reason, it is difficult to pin the incidents, for the cause of the incident, say, to the gun. Okay, gun as a tool is used. I mean, the person that snapped could have used anything else. Could even use the chemical or explosives and so forth. They are certainly equally deadly, and sometimes could be even worse. So that's why this gun issue is never resolved in that sense. I mean, people do express opinions. I mean, people do ask, why do we allow these kind of assault weapon that is military weapon that is with such a power? It doesn't make sense. It's not something that those kind of weapons sort of belong or in the entertainment and hunting category. Now, these are, for example, all sorts of weapons out there, and should we ban them? Ban them in the sense that people can have no access to it. But on the other hand, then the National Rifle Association or people prefer to have rights, owning guns. Always say that these kind of tragic incidents happens in the so-called gun-free zone. Yeah? Gun-free zone means that zone, that area is not allowed to have guns. And yet things happen. So that means these weapons are coming from outside, right? Now this leads to our thinking, now if you want to improve the security in schools, just to make sure the school doesn't have guns or things like that doesn't necessarily make the school safer or more secure. So this kind of a discussion certainly is worthwhile, and we should talk about it. And I think the way properly we should talk about it is not sort of overreact to a particular instance. I mean, natural natural situation is that when something like this happens, people will react and overreact, and then perhaps making decisions are not necessarily the most logical decision. So how do we deal with this? Really is through discussion in a calm way, and go through the logical path, and to define what really is the security, best security in schools, okay? And the purpose of security, of course, is to protect children. And what are the outside or the external forces that may come to school and harm children and so on and so forth? Now, I'm sort of doing a little random talking at this point, but I hope will get you, thinking, and we all sort of think about it and think through this whole logical path. Now, okay, we look at this Sandy Hook situation. We know the best, of course, is if we can have means to prevent something like that happen. But as we discussed before, and it's not that easy. Okay, it's not easy to prevent something that is totally out of the blue, and the people involved, for example, has nothing to do with the school, and not a student, and so on and so forth. So the prevention part really is difficult. Okay, however, I would like to lead you to think the prevention still, even though difficult, is still more important than having an emergency procedure, say in school. By the time you are exercising your emergency procedure, it's already late. Could be too late, in the sense that the tragedy already happening. Okay, so prevention still the most desirable thing to do. Okay, then question is, okay, how do we do that? As we said, people are the cause, and what kind of people may be sort of harming schools? Okay, let's make a broad category. Say one category is criminals. Okay, the criminals come to school, okay, hurt the children or teachers and so on. Now, that it's certainly a category we do have to worry about it, and particularly we know the criminals that involved with drugs, for example, and criminals are, say, sex offenders. And those are people that they can certainly come to school and harm children and so forth. Now, if we look at this category, probably we can deduce one thing is that other than the drug peddlers and sex offenders, those are situations, or those people, the criminals probably would not come to school because there's no gain, no criminal gain. They don't gain anything, so they probably would not just randomly come to school. So the second category, what really is problem, is the people they are not criminals. They don't have any records or have records showing any even unstable or some kind of a behavior that we know ahead of time. Those kind of people that come to school and does harm to children, that is the most difficult part. And this, I think, the only way, in my opinion, is that we have to raise the awareness of this problem so that everybody in the community is aware of this, and everybody contribute to this security in school concept, and that we all pay attention, be observant, be sort of helpful, and perhaps collectively, we may be able to, prevent incidents like this to happen, or at least, reduce the chance of that kind of event to happen, or increased our odds in the sense of preventing such thing to happen. Now, how do you do this collectively? We talk about community, it means the whole town and the school and parents and teachers and so on. How do we work together? And I think that is something that I think would be important. Okay. let's see a few pictures about people talking about security. Now, when people are talking about security, it means sometimes using tools to make surveillance so that you watch a premise or a place constantly, 24/7, in that sense. Now, this is certainly possible. If you have security personnel watching a place, a 7/24 certainly would improve the security. Now, in a school situation, if we do that, certainly it would be helpful. That's why there are suggestions. People say, "Oh, we got to have security guards, or even armed, guards or police at each school building." Now, this kind of suggestion raises a question, though. Okay. Besides the cost involved, okay, certainly it's not inexpensive when you have personnel, armed, trained personnel in every school building. That's a very expensive, proposition. But they also, it really changes the ambient of a school. I mean, as I said before, a school should be a peaceful place. It's a place that children have no fear, and children learn. But if you have these armed personnel presence, even just different from the school setting, it does have an effect on kids. This reminds me back in I don't know 70s or 60s, when people travel going through airport, or sometimes in the city plaza, so forth, the tourists walking through these airport and streets, seeing these machine gun carrying, military uniformed personnel, among tourists, and sometimes the tourist gets, a little bit, just uncomfortable. I think if for adults they feel uncomfortable, you can imagine that in school for children to have such a situation, it may not be so good. So I'm not so sure having armed personnel is necessarily the solution. Okay, even though you might have say less chance for people to come through, but still it's not necessarily the person can cover every corner of the building, or watch every classroom and so forth. And besides, and the school is not only classroom activities. The school has outside activities, sports, music, and so on and so forth. And do you have to have these kind of security guards in every event, every activity? I mean, that, again, it's something that it's probably difficult to maintain. So then, okay, now people say, well, another thing you could do is to have these surveillance. Okay, let's see, let me show a picture of a surveillance. All right, this might not be a school picture, but surveillance means that you have a camera that it's watching over a certain area. And this type of thing certainly can be implemented in school. Nowadays with internet technology, so-called web camera and so on, it's fairly inexpensive to put cameras, okay, in many places. in the school building, in the particularly by the entrances, and certain areas, and these cameras would have images, and people can watch or record it for later for tracking. Now, why I say this is possible solution, because first of all, the technology is here. Secondly, it's not that expensive. Thirdly, I think it's more important, it works in the concept I said about collectively working together to improve the security. Just imagine you have several cameras that cover a school building and entrance, parking lot, so forth. Now, these cameras, images, can be all accessible on the internet. Today, technology such is so easy to do that. And of course, I jumped ahead a little bit to say worry about other issues. For example, people would oppose this because privacy, so on. We could have these images, the camera surveillance, being say accessible only with secured passwords. In other words, if these cameras are on school premises and all the school personnel, teachers and students, or selected people, can have access to it. And they may be even assigned, methodically assigned to cover the school hours, Monday to Friday, or to even 7 days, few hours a day, and with redundancy built in, several people are watching the same camera, and it can be done very easily, just like I do on my computer here with pictures. Imagine if these are real camera, they will be live. So let's see. I will just show another picture here. And you can have these kind of pictures on a teacher's, say, computer. So if the teacher, for a given day, certain hours is assigned as duty to watch, then they simply put this camera picture on their computer, and even while they're working, they could keep an eye on this picture so that they can see what's going on. Now, this particular picture is a sort of street corner, road corner, which is a good leading for me to sort of extend the surveillance coverage from a school building out to the community. Again, I think collectively contributing to sort of improve security is the only answer to make our community and schools more secure. Now, imagine if you have these surveillance cameras, let me show you another camera here, example. These cameras that are covering the intersection of roads that are leading to schools. And then, what's the advantage? The advantage is that the traffic going through through these roads to school, in and out, are monitored. Now, again, if these monitored, these videos have been, say, watched by people, multiple people, and on the 24/7 basis, let's say, I'm not so sure it need to be 24, but at least certain hours, and then I think it has a very good deterrent effect for first category, the criminals. I think the criminals, if they realize that this town has the major roads surveyed, under surveillance, and school buildings under surveillance, I think they won't bother to, coming in or do anything. Particularly for criminals that they have nothing to gain. For non-criminals or for people that behave somewhat abnormally, perhaps this type of surveillance still is useful because you can spot them. Let's say you watch a car that is driving in some weird way, or somebody carrying something that is suspicious coming in and out of the car. If you are the monitor and you are watching the surveillance camera, you can then report to proper authorities. And on this internet system, that next to the camera could be a button you just click. The button can send out an email, can make a phone call to a particular number that would it be receiving a message. Something is observed, something is kind of abnormal, and you want to alert people, right? So this kind of arrangement, I would say that from a implementation point of view, it's not so difficult, and even the cost is not so much. One-time cost could be fairly reasonable, but the difficulty, the challenge, really is this collective effort. How do we all work together, help this situation to improve the securities in our schools, in our community? Okay, for example, the schools may want to work with the town, whether the town traffic department or any department that it's together to strategically set up the surveillance system throughout the town in a major thoroughway leading to schools. And then in the school itself, particularly school entrances, is under surveillance. And then you have a sign-in process which really screens people coming in and out of the school building. And that total package, I think, would be fairly useful and could be fairly effective in deterring any sort of instance like the Sandy Hook type of situation to occur. Okay, so in a nutshell, I think the school itself certainly should have a secure sign-in process, and I think it's probably fair, and it's probably not difficult to implement, is to have entrances limited to 1 or maximum 2 during the school hours, and the other sort of access point is locked, so that anyone come in and out of school during those hours, they have to go through the sign-in process. And if the sign process is also covered by the surveillance camera, again, you have more eyes besides just one person sitting at a desk of the sort of reception. So why more eyes is important? Because, again, for preventing people that have no criminal record, have nothing that really, leads to anything other than people somehow know these people, or somehow people are very observant and put, 1 + 1 = 2, or some kind of a, correlation, and can spot this, then you have this preventive way of preventing tragedy to happen. More eyes, more brains behind, better, certainly. So if you have this camera throughout the internet system that is accessible or observable by multiple people. Now, people, of course, have to be qualified people. We don't want to really compromise unnecessarily any privacy issue. Okay, I know if you talk about this kind of surveillance and so on, the American Civil Liberty